All right, here is some more definition on this concept of anthology of thought. Now, and I'm calling it anthology of thought because the root words for anthology mean flower and word, conjuring up an image of a word flower or word garden, and this pulling together a bouquet, as it were, of words about thought is something that's hopefully going to be accomplished here, but describing what thought is. Now, some basic ideas in the understanding of thought have to do with footprints left in the mind. What does this mean? The mind leaves traces of previous thoughts, and there is no word specific for this that I have found outside of the jargon of specific areas of study. And perhaps developing a word could be fun. But looking at linguistics, there is a word in linguistics that talks about sound and recognizable sounds in the brain, and the smallest unit of a recognizable sound in the brain in linguistics is called a phoneme. And an interesting, funny story, when I was studying Filipino and the Filipino dialects, mostly I was studying Tagalog, they make an excessive use of a particular phoneme that isn't used in English very much. It is in English, but not used the same way as it is in Tagalog, and I was not able to understand what that sound was, and I was not able to repeat it until finally I had to look it up, and I see, oh, okay, this is what it is. This is how they're producing this sound. And then I was able to repeat it, but I had not developed a phoneme for it. My brain couldn't recognize or repeat that sound. So, as I'm generating language, the brain is grabbing its phonemes and producing the sounds. And the same thing goes as I am listening to language. The phonemes catch the sound, and I understand, I recognize, this is a recognizable sound. Now, this idea of a trace or an imprint or a footprint that is existing in the brain is significant because it doesn't just apply to speech or sounds or phonemes. All thought seems to develop this way, and it seems to follow a pattern as it develops. When I'm speaking, I don't have to stop and think of every single word or syllable. The brain is generating subconsciously what I'm about to say. However, where do these trace words come from? They are like the phoneme, they already exist in the mind, and I think it might be fun to refer to them as, a brain footprint, maybe a psychoped, or if something a little bit more poetic or flowery, going back to the anthology idea, calling it an anthroped might be fun too. Thinking of this imagery of a garden or life growing in the brain. But whatever the term should be, the concept of the brain generating new ideas based off of these traces is a fundamental and a rudimentary notion of what I'm about to say. Now, these traces exist in the form of what the brain has already learned, what the brain already knows, but it is used to generate something new. So it looks back to the past, mapping out the past of what is known, but also generating into the future. This is not an insignificant concept because there is a pattern of development which would seemingly branch or root down into the past of what is known, but also stretch and branch forward into the future, blossoming new ideas. Now, does this pattern exist in a specific way? This is the question. How specific does this pattern get? Potential thought is infinite, but thought as it exists in the mind is punctuated infinity. The mind can't handle the infinite nature of all possible thought. It punctuates it. It puts it into little understandable boxes or phonemes or psychopeds. And these brain footprints follow out after specific patterns. Now, turning again to linguistics, and we will get into other examples, but as an example of how this works in the brain, the early research of the linguist Noam Chomsky showed that across languages, as language was being developed in the minds of children, there was a pattern to language development. And if this had to do with if a language developed a certain way, it would form, like, for example, it had to do with subject, verb, object, or did a language develop into an object, verb, subject? And as the children were cultivating their understanding of whatever language they were learning, the brain followed specific patterns in that language development. Now, this is significant because this language was already developed for them, so a past, but the significance of it is it was patterned out. It wasn't completely haphazard and random. So this is an example of this thought pattern developed in the brain. Another place, stepping outside of linguistics, and one of the founders, I believe, of the British National Trust, before he was a founder of the National Trust, he had developed a museum practice where he was struck by the significance of ordinary and mundane items. Instead of having, Pharaoh's gold and rubies, and he was interested in the ordinary things of everyday life. And interestingly enough, he was inspired by Charles Darwin, Origin of Species, to develop this idea that he noticed that across cultures, and he would go to places like Asia and China and bring back farm equipment and whatnot, and he would see that similar tools were developing all around the world, and they developed slightly differently, but there was a unification, a unison to their development. Again, this speaks to a recognizable pattern in the development or evolution of stuff like farm equipment, showing that first there has to be a pattern of development existing in the brain as these tools are first concepts and then tools in real life. Now, a few basic ideas to go with this anthology of thought, some of the basic concepts to thought itself. Thought cannot be static. Thought is like life. Intelligence is in some ways life itself, and it must be growing, it must be changing. Now, it starts with the brain starts with what it knows, this phoneme or this anthropod. It takes a thought that it already has, and then it projects it in a patterned way into the future, developing it one step at a time in apparently a sort of a binary yes or no process into a new concept. So there is some of the basic understanding, some of the basic building blocks for this idea of anthology of thought, trying to develop a further understanding of what thought is. And for now, that will have to be enough, because things must come to an end, and this is it.